Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for this panel discussion today in celebration of World Social Justice Day. My name is Paul Ladd and I'm the director of the UN Research Institute for Social Development based in Geneva. Now, UNRISD is a very special bit of the UN. We're autonomous, independent, which means that we can ask the really difficult questions around identity, power, politics, and how to make real change happen in the world. It's our 60th birthday this year, and partly in celebration of that, we held a concert last week in the Palais des Nations, in the Human Rights Room, where 600 or 700 people were jumping up and down so hard it almost made the floor break. Today, for our discussion, we're joined by two amazing artists from that concert, plus also two colleagues from the UN. And the topic we're going to be exploring is the link between art and culture, mobility, and social justice. Now, I've got a number of questions, and I'll probably follow up with some more questions as we go through. But I'm going to start with, and I'm very honoured to welcome Lido Pimienta, who was our headliner for the concert on Thursday last week. She's a multidisciplinary visual artist. She's a musician. She's a mother. She's a curator. She's a critic. She's a comedian, as we could tell also from how she guided us through her concert the other day. And my question to you, Lido, to begin with, is really through your work, through your chosen career, through your passion, how do you think what you do influences the journey towards social justice? And maybe just start by just telling us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you do and how it is important to social justice or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I think it all boils down to me being born in the north coast of Colombia, being brought up in an indigenous Wayu culture and Black culture in the Afro-Colombian context. I think that, people will call me or will say like, oh, Lido, she's a social justice warrior and she makes this kind of music, while I'm simply just singing about my lived experience. So I think that a lot of what I do is just displaying what I live through in my everyday life and adding the layer of being an immigrant to Canada. And that has opened a lot of questions and given me a lot of answers, because when I lived in Colombia, there was a lot of knowing and being very fully aware that indigenous people and the rest of Colombia are very different and are treated very differently. And then you move to Canada and then you have your first person telling you to go back to your country, when the idea that Canada is this all-encompassing, benevolent country that is welcoming all the immigrants, So I think that's where I come from, and that's my lived reality, and that's my lived experience, and that's pretty much what I do. I'm thankful for my background and thankful for all the complexities, because then I get to talk about them on stage and share with an audience who wants to listen.
Yeah. So you are a trailblazer, and yet, of course, the label social justice activist is quite a heavy one to bear as well. It's your lived experience. It's who you are. It's what you're bringing. I just wanted to ask, do people write to you? Do you inspire them? Do people say, how you've helped them in their day-to-day life? You probably also get some hate mail too. I mean, what's your experience of how you connect with people around the world?
Yeah, I actually get very hesitant when people call me an activist. I feel like I like shoes way too much to be called an activist. I think it's a disservice and a dishonor to real activists around the world. I think the bar has to be so low that I'm called an activist, because I respect activists so much. I feel like music is a beautiful tool to bring people together. And that is why a lot of people will get a hold of me after my shows, or, comedy is this offset for the tragedy that are my songs. And I understand the emotional connection that people have with me. I'm very aware of that. And I get a lot of texts or emails and messages from people thanking me because their music gave them the strength to come out to their parents. I get messages from women that are getting out of abusive relationships and are saying that my music helped them a lot. People that are going through a divorce, but also a lot of hate. And people, saying that I should unalive myself if I don't like it, or, well, if you don't like it here, then go back to your country, and just stuff like that. That it's that can be very hurtful. But I feel like, I don't know, after almost a decade living as a public persona on the internet, you just look at the spelling mistakes and just point that out and move on with your day. That's how I kind of live by.
Great, thank you very, very much. We're going to switch now to the other side of the world and introduce our second panelist today, who's DJ MJ. She's a multi-award-winning artist and DJ from Ghana. She's a community organizer. She's the official DJ for one of Africa's top female rappers, Eno Barony, as well as the first female DJ in Ghana to release Rhythm, called MJ Rhythm. She's a regular feature in DJ competitions and increasingly famous around the world. She warmed us up for our concert the other day with other DJs and dancers, and it was such an amazing thing to see. The same question to you, if I may, and please just start off by introducing yourself in your own words, the journey that you've been on, and whether you face, if you like, the same similar opportunities, challenge, existential questions about perhaps being labelled as a social activist, a trailblazer in your own country.
Okay, thanks for the question. But for my country, the culture is women are supposed to be made to be people living in the kitchen. When I say kitchen, people, women can't really showcase their talent. So in the music industry in Ghana, for instance, is male-dominated. We have less women being seen in the music industry. So me being a disc jockey, it took a whole lot of time and energy and determination to make sure that I single myself out to be one of the best among the male-dominated areas. So with that research, I noticed again that a lot of the women in my country, they do very well with their talents in music, but they are not being able to showcase their talent. They are not given the platforms in which they need to showcase this talent. So during that moment or momentums of that incident, I was able to bring out an event called Diverse Invasion, a platform that helped to showcase talent of women. That's nurturing of women and all that. And so that's what I activate for. So people in my country know me to be someone or an artist that fights for women in music industry.
It's amazing. I'm really interested how you got started. Where did you find your first bit of kit? Who did you borrow it from? Where did you find it? How long did you have to practice for to show that you were better than so many other people in the business?
I had to practice. I think my talent is natural given by God, because the first time I stepped out in the club to play it was a party, but my opportunity was given to me by a male friend, because I got into the club and he wasn't feeling well, and so I went to him. I was like, "Can I help you?" He said no. I said, "Can I help you?" He said no. He doesn't. I said, "No, just give me a chance. Let me play just 5 songs." And that's how my beautiful journey started. So when I started the journey, I noticed that when you move to one club, if you say you're a lady, you want to play, nobody wants to employ you, because they don't have that confidence in you as a woman that you can deliver. So I had to try and fight harder by climbing the stage. When there's a competition, I go there, say, "No, I can't do this. Just give me the time to showcase my talent." So gradually, I was getting into the scene. So when I got into the scene, I said, no, this is the time to create avenues from what I do to invest in it and bring other female on board. And I can boldly say, and I'm glad that through these platforms I was creating, one of the artists I came with, that's the Max DJ, was also given opportunity on that platform, and today she's the Max DJ.
Great. So everyone is pleased that you got your break, that you broke through the ceiling. And sort of the same question, do young women in Ghana, or even in further afield, now that you're becoming an international celebrity and artist, they write to you? Do they say you're inspiring them?
Yes, I get a lot of mails and messages from other young female acts, and they want to know how I managed to combine, because actually I'm not just a disc jockey. I also work in the financial center, the banking center, so I combine 2 professions. That's not easy. So They wonder how I'm able to manage to stand out like that. So I kind of help them and group them to be the best.
Thank you, MJ. I'm going to turn to one of my colleagues now from the Research Institute, Katja Huyo, who's the head of our UNRISD Bonn office, but also is the lead author for many of our really important and groundbreaking reports on, long words here, but ecological social contracts, how countries and populations can move to new deals with their governments, is our lead author on issues of inequalities and crises, how inequalities lead to crisis and then leave people in a worse position afterwards, and has been with the Institute for an incredibly long time doing important work. Katja, if you like, from our perspective as researchers, as international civil servants, as people who tried to change the world by touching minds, how do you see the relationship between sort of art, culture, and social justice?
Thank you very much, Paul, and it's really an honor and a pleasure to sit on this stage here with you incredible artists and colleagues from the UN to talk about a topic that is not so usual in the UN, nor it is usual in science or academic scholarship, but it's extremely important, as Paul said. We try to produce evidence and the data and policy recommendations for the United Nations and for policymakers on how to promote social justice, how to promote sustainable development. But very often these debates remain in a niche for people of higher education, for people who have climbed up the ladder, who are sitting in these fora that discuss, UN topics and policy making. And we also want to reach basically the broad public. We want to reach people who are concerned, people who are actually suffering from social injustices, and we also want to reach activists and change makers, so many people in civil society who are actually fighting injustice and wanting to make a change. And arts is an incredibly powerful instrument to reach these broader audiences, and it's actually using a different language and a different methodology. And I think when I think about arts, it's really something that can help us to educate people, to elevate people, to inspire people. It's really such a wonderful expression of humanity. And so what we try to do at UNRISD is increasingly to involve arts and artistic methodologies in our research, but also to really organize artistic events or arts competitions, to invite people to talk about social justice with their artistic work. So I think this is, our way helping to bridge these communities and really to touch people also at a very different level, emotionally, through visuals, through music, literature, poetry, and I think this is a very, very powerful instrument indeed.
See, our whole strategy is focused on contributing to policies and practices that reduce inequalities in all dimensions and recognizing that people are different. So the concept of intersectionality is very, very important. And as you mentioned, we also hold art exhibitions. Last year, we had an exhibition in the Palais des Nations where we had 1,200 submissions from around the world of people drawing how they see equality, but also inequality, the challenges that they face. And I think it's quite a unique approach within the UN to couple this sort of art and brains, if you like, reports and policies, but also getting younger generations especially involved in, fighting for what they care about, what they naturally care about. But it also happens in the world of work. And so Oliver Lang is joining us from the International Labour Organization, where he's responsible for a ton of really important things. But I guess the main locus is employment and work. And, everybody, most people, unless you're very privileged, most people have to work. MJ's holding down 2 jobs as an international change leader and a banker. From your mandate in the ILO, where you're responsible for art and culture and employment, but also important topics like the safety of journalists around the world, how do you see, from the ILO's perspective and your personal perspective, how art connects with culture, connects with mobility, connects with social justice?
Thanks, Paul. So I come from a UN agency that deals with labor matters. It's a unique agency because we bring together governments through the labor ministries, but also trade unions and employer associations to kind of talk about these issues and come up with solutions. And recently we had a meeting last year about the arts and entertainment sector. So, what's clear is, as we've heard already, art is an extremely important way to promote social justice, to promote decent work. But at the same time, artists, especially musicians as well, need social justice themselves. And so one of the things that was revealed in this meeting is just the enormous challenges a lot of art workers face, from wages, fair remuneration, especially in the digital environment, to things like freedom of association and collective bargaining, social protection, making sure that during stints where you might not be working, you get some sort of revenue or are covered in case of things like accidents or illness and injury. And we've heard it here today, the incredible harassment and violence that a lot of cultural workers face as well. So these are some of these really important social justice issues, I think, that are affecting artists as well, and the ILO is quite keen on supporting that work.
So a heads up to all the panelists now. Now, we've put the sort of ideal picture of how art contributes to social justice out there, and we've described what drives us. I'm going to turn to obstacles and the things that are sort of acting against us in a minute. But let me connect through one follow-up question to you, Oliver, if I may. So it's incredibly difficult to move at the moment. The world is against mobility. The world is against migration. The world is showing sometimes it's racism, frankly, in terms of artists being able to get visas to travel the world. Does that come up a lot in your work at the ILO?
Well, it's certainly a big concern to musician unions, definitely. The enormous amount of paperwork that has to go through tours, not only visas, but things like rare woods and instruments, making sure that you have a taxation schemes in place, because you might be taxed at the place where you're touring, and of course then you have to report that income in your home country as well. Things like making sure that you have adequate health insurance. So it is definitely an issue. It's a very particular one in the scheme of migration, so I think it definitely merits further international work to make it easier for artists to do exactly what they're supposed to do, and that is to travel the world and share and interchange their culture.
Yeah. I mean, this panel, the concert that we held a few days ago, wouldn't have been possible without two really important cultural organisations in Geneva, Festival Antigel and SHAP. And I know that SHAP explained to us how difficult it is for them each year now to curate the music that they want to show Switzerland and Geneva, largely because of this visa issue and a backlash against mobility, which is terribly difficult. But it's a question, so Lido, the next question to you is really about obstacles. You may not be visas, it may be other things, but what do you see as the main challenges for artists who want to bring their message to the world? Are there challenges against, is there a backlash, is it visas, or any other things that you want to bring to the table?
Yeah, I think we've been able to touch upon it. It's funny because I am currently working through the process of getting visa for my team to play in the USA. And the process can be, very expensive. It can also be very tedious because you have to give them all of this information that proves that you've worked together. And it can be really daunting. And if you don't do it through, like a particular time, then you're going to have to pay extra fees so that it gets expedited faster. If you don't have good management, if you don't have a good team, you might always have to pay so much money so that you can, maybe go and pay so much money. So and sometimes the tours don't even make the money that you spent on the visa. Mm-hmm. And the taxes are still retained in the other country. I've always felt too, in terms of movement, I'm privileged enough that I have dual citizenship and I have a Canadian passport that allows me more access to other countries around the world, but I have a Colombian team, and for Colombians to travel, even to come to Canada, you need a visa. And it's so, what's interesting to me is that, Canada as a country has 23 working mining corporations functioning in Colombia. 23. That's a lot of displacement. That's a lot of violence. That's a lot of poverty. That's a lot of hunger. There's a lot of thirst on my people. Yet for Colombians to go to Canada, they still require a visa. And the visa process, it's long, it's expensive, it's invasive, So I was even thinking like it would make sense for a country like Canada that is quote unquote, socially aware and socialist leaning and very liberal. We have a very popular prime minister with that beautiful hair of his. So I'm like, if I am representing Canada, because I am, wherever I go, I represent Canada and Colombia. I'm very fully aware and I try to do a good job at it. Wouldn't it make sense for the tickets for musicians that are representing, like you as an artist from Ghana, like your country should be giving you these tickets, or it should be extremely cheap because you are bringing Ghanaian culture to other places in the world. So I feel like that should be like a law that is given, the carrying, like we have to pay so much in baggage fees because of the instruments that we have. You can't just rent them in Geneva, I can't like go to Paris and be like, I need a tambora alegre llamador. Like they're gonna be like, what are you talking about? So just little things like that, it can like really shift the paradigm, and it can really help culture, because culture, like I see myself as an ambassador. I'm an ambassador of Colombia. I'm an ambassador of Canada, with my art, and I feel like that's like at the top,
Yeah.
I can handle the social media. I can handle, the fear that comes, because we face also the bigger the platform, you're supposed to have more power. But actually you have more eyes on you, and there's a lot of people that don't agree with your views politically. So a lot of artists are very afraid to even stand up for what's happening in their own countries. Like I am a huge... I critique a lot of like my fellow Colombians, for instance, when there's something happening in Colombia and they're just posting, pictures of themselves in their private jets, and I think that it's like, and that's at the core of capitalism, where the goal is to have access to money and to things, and when you come from a poor background, that is your absolute goal. And you don't want anything to mess with your money, with your bag. And I understand that, but at the same time, I want justice for everybody. And I want everyone to have opportunities and justice and equality and equity. And that's another thing that like I see that it's like hard, like for someone like me, like even what's happening right now in Sudan, Congo, Palestine, like my stances on that are very clear. And like, it feels like saying that you want peace, it's a bad thing, and it's really hard, because a lot of artists are being bombarded with don't speak up, don't say anything. And that's when you realize, oh, actually musicians, artists, we have a lot of influence, we have a lot of power, and I would like to be able to live in a world where I can be able to express whatever I want, just like anyone can say whatever they want without being afraid of being, losing followers or not being invited to play at whatever festival and stuff like that. So, I don't know. I feel like I navigate it in a good way, like I have a good outlook at life, but I see a lot of my friends and a lot of my colleagues that are suffering because A, they can't move, B, they can't speak up for what they believe in, and C, they're completely erased, because at the core of it, if you don't fit an image of success that is immediately related to, your proximity to whiteness and your proximity to wealth, you're not able to succeed, in this. So for people like me that make music from the heart, you have to make that decision, right? I think in a nutshell is like, do I want to be an artist or do I want to be an entertainer?
Yeah.
And then you make that decision, and then the paths and the doors will open or close. So That's
fascinating. I think we need to come back to this actually on the ability. There's the barriers to movement and the things that we understand, but also, I think, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but it's almost the model that we're in, the model that we're encouraging young people to grow up into is about success, influence, followers, consumption. And I think that risks taking us away from the sort of natural humanity that we normally feel, or we should feel, with fellow human beings around the world who are facing hardship or discrimination or violence or poverty. And I think this very unequal world that we're living at the moment is almost a barrier in itself. It's like the system's against us. And this is deeply, deeply unfortunate. But I'm not a panelist. DJ MJ, could tell us. I mean, you've already talked about the context of where you were not expected to be a leader. You were not expected to be a musician. Frankly, but the men in your community didn't expect you to do that. But what have been the personal obstacles and barriers for you as you've charted this course in the last few years?
So I'll say in the last few years, just as Lino said, there's been cultural diplomacy. When I say cultural diplomacy, it does mean that we, the artists, being able to get access to move around the world to showcase our talent. It's very difficult to have that exchange background. So when you want to get access to visa, it's very difficult. Like most of the time, we are being denied from getting the visa to be able to come and showcase our talent. I'm sure we would have been in Geneva last year as Antigel was trying to bring us on board, but we couldn't get access to it because of visa issues. Yes, so apart from the visa issues, we have where there's a limitation of resources and funds. From where I'm coming from, a lot of artists have a good project. They would want to showcase people or music they would want to promote, but because they don't have the resources, the equipment to be able to bring those things up, they can't. They don't have enough funds from people to help them to invest in what they do. You see that the project will be hanging. They can't seem to proceed with those projects. And another thing is also has to do with education. You see, if we don't have good education with the kind of artists you are doing, like a school for singing. So we train people to sing, train people to have musical background. We don't have that. A school for DJing, where people will be trained to become good or great DJs in delivering the arts, that we don't have that. So I think that all these things, when the policymakers are making the policies, they should consider, bringing out things like this that will help us, because music is a very powerful tool. That's it.
Completely got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Back to Katja. What does research tell us about these obstacles? What is the world? Where is the world moving to on mobility? Where is the world moving to on cooperation? Where is the world moving to in terms of recognizing, empowering girls and women, and whether there's a backlash against gender equality or any other human rights? What's actually happening out there?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think a couple of decades ago we were quite optimistic. We had seen a lot of social progress, and also progress for women, for girls. There were a lot of social movements coming up for equality, especially fights against discrimination of people of color, of minorities, religious minorities. People with disabilities, poor people, who are always a great group of people who are discriminated everywhere. And there was a kind of an optimism, but I think in the recent years, the picture has become more gloom, and people are losing a little bit trust and faith in the progress of our societies and also of our global community. And this has very much to do with the rising inequalities that we have analyzed so deeply in our institute, and where, and not only UNRISD, but so many economists and sociologists and other scientists have really published the data that we are for more than 3-4 decades now in a period of rising inequalities. We see extreme concentration of wealth and income at the top, And we also see that this wealth and income concentration, leads to political bias, and it leads to social polarization. It leads to climate change, because, the richest are also those responsible for the greatest emissions. We also see a growing global south, global north divide. And we see this also reflected in global governance. And this is why, of course, and not to talk about mobility. Yeah, I mean, we are working for migrants' rights and free movement for many, many years, but we still see that people are undertaking really dangerous and risky journeys in order to realize their dreams, to migrate to a better place and to support their families back home with remittances and, with the skills that they bring back. So there is not so much positive, I think, on increasing social and migration mobility and equality. But on the other hand, what makes me feel optimistic is that, there is a growing awareness now worldwide that this needs to be reversed, and that we have reached, in a way, not only a tipping point regarding the environmental crisis, but also a tipping point in terms of our rising inequalities. And, people are increasingly demanding really, to introduce policies for greater equality and social justice.
Yeah, so I think inequalities has been a trend that we've been tracking in UNRISD for a long time, and we've seen it lead to various fractures that you mentioned. You didn't mention, I'm going to put you on the spot, you didn't mention technology, but both you and I have had children now that have grown up in an era where they're exposed to many new ways of both expressing themselves but also receiving information. Do you think this technology, maybe combined with the economic system we've got and the inequalities it produces, has also been an extra factor in halting the progress we were so optimistic about 2 decades ago?
Yeah, I think, most people would also agree that technologies brings opportunities and challenges, But again, it's with everything that's happening at the moment, with all the global trends that we observe. If we don't intervene, if we don't regulate these things, if we don't try to harness these trends and this technological progress for humanity and social progress, it will increase the divides. And of course, you also mentioned, of course, youth and children, and we heard about, certain hate speech and so we also know that it has its dark side, the internet, the social media. But again, I think if we are able, to regulate that, and that will be also very important for artificial intelligence, for example, and other technologies, if we are able, to make sure that there is not this increasing divide, also especially between global south and global north, because, we see that there is huge technological progress, in the digital and ICT world, but also in terms of, climate technologies and all of that. And this increasingly, polarizes again the world between, those who have that technology and sell it, and those who don't have that technology. And this is why I think the UN and the global community has also a huge responsibility to make sure, that first, this technology is regulated in a way that protects people from the negative impacts, and that it makes sure that everyone has access to these technologies, whether it's, a digital communication technology or a technology, that helps us to be, greener and helps us to combat climate change.
Yeah, and there was this really fascinating study, I think about a month or so ago, which showed that the views of young men and young women are diverging in certain polities, with women generally remaining more liberal, and unfortunately young men moving to what we would call the political right, with the influences, the information they're receiving, the role models that they're accessing. This is deeply, deeply unfortunate and unhelpful, I think, for the world as it is trying to get towards, a state of greater social justice. So we've heard the obstacles for artists, from visas to sexism and discrimination. We've heard how research, feeds into this, particularly our research on inequalities. Oliver, you sit in a really important bit of the international system, which, because of its tripartite structure, actually does the rules setting. By bringing governments, employers, and trade unions together, you're actually incrementally setting the standards to which everybody has to keep. How is that work going on in this particular space? How are you coming to agreements that protect artists, that support artists who are both social justice activists themselves, but also, as you said, how it can protect them as artists as well? How is that work being taken forward?
Well, there's a lot of topics, I think, that the ILO is working on that are particularly relevant. So one of the exciting things that's happened recently is the adoption of the ILO Convention on Violence and Harassment, which aims to address workplace violence and harassment, including gender-based violence and harassment. It's one of the conventions that's being rapidly ratified. So that's really exciting. It provides a legal framework precisely to address the kinds of violence and harassment that cultural workers, for example, face, not only at the workplace, but in social events, during travel, during tours, during press events, and so forth. So that's quite exciting. I think in the area of skills, and I think this goes back to Katya's point on technology, is super important. We've got electric guitars here. They're a bit anachronistic these days. As we were talking about, now you sample that stuff and it goes through all sorts of artificial intelligence technology, and you can make music. But that poses a lot of dangers because, as you said, it's not just about who's got those technologies, but who's controlling those technologies and what kind of cultural sovereignty do those offer, right? If it's only a bunch of Western companies that are running all this stuff, are they going to create a narrative, a cultural narrative that's purely Western? Are they going to fairly remunerate indigenous artists who might be getting sucked up by all these artificial intelligence machines? So these are really important issues. And I think finally I would just say one of the key principles for the ILO is still freedom of association and collective bargaining. That is to say that all workers, and that includes independent workers, should at least have the right to be represented through some sort of professional or trade union that can articulate their concerns to governments, but also to employers, and if it's appropriate, to then engage in negotiation about certain conditions of work.
Yeah, and so obviously the ILO can't do this alone as well. There are other big bits of the multilateral system, as we would call it, that you need to work with on issues of technology. Technology is sort of a newer issue for the UN, and with various agencies have got a finger in the pie. But who do you work with particularly, to actually advance this in the direction you want to advance it?
Well, there's a lot of agencies that deal with it. It's great to discover what UNRISD is doing on it, but of course UNESCO is a big player here. I don't want to speak for UNESCO, but they have a number of important normative instruments in this regard. There is a fantastic instrument, the 1980 Recommendation on the Status of Artists, which is very much based on ILO instruments and talks a lot about the kind of working conditions that artists should enjoy, but also some of the state policies that are recommended to promote art. And a lot of it goes to some of the concerns that have been raised by MJ and Lido about making sure that young artists get opportunities, to make sure that cultural policies support public access to cultural events. And here maybe I would throw a last radical idea from the ILO. One of the things that we also look at is work-life balance, right? Making sure that people have time to live and don't only have to work to survive. And this is such an important element, I think, in culture, because in order to enjoy culture, as opposed to other consumer goods, which you can just buy off the internet, you actually need time to go to a concert. You need a couple of hours to see a theater piece. And this was a big concept back in the old days of the labor movement, making sure that workers had time to play. And I think we need to accentuate that again.
Okay, thanks, Oliver. So we're approaching the end of the panel, and I've just been blown away, really, I think, by where people are on this, the journeys that they've been on, but also the obstacles they face. And in some ways it can be quite depressing to get bogged down in that. So the last segment of the panel is really about how to be positive. How can the work that you do as artists, or we do as people that work in international organizations, actually contribute to addressing systemic inequalities and promote equal opportunities for all, irrespective of whether people's situations are because of their race, ethnicity, age, disability, gender identity, sexual orientation, any of these things that make us people. What do you actually propose that we do? What's the positive path forward? So that's the tough question. And then the second one is, if you just want to leave us with one message, I don't know how many people are going to be listening to this evening, but many, many more are going to be listening in the next few months. What is the one thing that you would ask them to do, the one thing that would inspire them?
Yeah, I guess there's many things. Again, I'm speaking from my own experience. Any bit of privilege or access to money that I have, for instance, one of the ways that I'm working through the inequality of it all, ever since the pandemic, I started looking at Colombia as a place of possibility, because I feel like in Colombia and or in North America, Colombia is a place where you should not go, you should not visit, only be a tourist. And if you're Colombian, just stay away from it. That's kind of like a message that you get. I cannot wait until I go back and live in Colombia permanently. I'm just waiting for my kids to be done with school. But it's so funny when I go back and I see so many people from wealthy countries that are buying apartments, buying entire buildings, buying beach land, river land, and they're building hotels, hostels, where all the employers are German, English, British, Israeli, and then the jobs that are for cleaning and cooking, and the less paid jobs are then for the indigenous or local people that they're displacing. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, so it's unsafe for me, but it is safe for a European? Okay, so I was like, I got whatever little savings that I had, and I found land in this territory, the Wayuu territory in La Guajira, which is this territory, this state that borders Venezuela, and is in the northern part of Colombia, and it's desertic, and it's the land of the Wayuu people. So I got a hectare, I think that's the word in English, and I am currently designing with an architect who's also Colombian that lives and she's amazing. They have a wonderful studio in the US, and we are co-designing an artist residency that is also going to be a restaurant for indigenous people, by indigenous people, built by indigenous Wayuu people, because charity doesn't work. And there's so many organizations that come to our territories and they're like, we are going to give you this money so you can build a pump for water. But they don't leave you with the money for the infrastructure so that the pumps can last and so that people can be employed, because I feel like employment is dignity. People don't want to just be handed money. People want to work in the field that they do. So one of the things that I want to do in this artist residency is to give the same reverence that a Louis Vuitton bag will have to a bag made by indigenous hands, because these women are masters. They're like geometry masters making these crocheted beautiful works that will last you forever, but they're sold for, I don't know, less than 20 euro, But then a Louis Vuitton bag with cheap leather is sold for 5K, So I'm kind of like, how can we do that? So that's my contribution. That's how I've been, I have my platform and I sing my little songs, and whatever money I have, I know that I'm gonna be investing it in here. And when I'm performing, and you in this world, you do meet a lot of well-meaning, very rich people that have so much money they don't know what to do with it. So I already know it's gonna be like, do you wanna have your name on this wall in this artist residency? You can have it now. You just sign this check. You don't know how much money I'm gonna need, but you just sign this check. So I feel like that's, if there's anything of a message, that would be the message. The message is that, there's a separation that exists when we talk about indigenous people, as if indigenous people are this group of clueless victims that don't know how to read, that don't know how to function in life, and when they need to be saved. No, we are people that use the Wi-Fi and the internet just like everyone else, and want to make money and want to take care of their families just like everybody else. So I feel like that would be the main thing to me. My main message is like the same reverence that we give to these big fashion brands that are appropriating and culturally appropriating and selling, our art as their own, that we start teaching people to value that art, that it's not craft, that is art. And I feel like at the core, once that message comes through, Colombians and South Americans and North Americans can start understanding how we are not just the same, because I don't feel that I like the fact that we're different.
Yeah.
And I think that difference is beautiful. Yeah. But to understand that we can respect one another's and respect one another's or each other's differences and culture as what it is. So that would be my message. It's not craft, it's art.
Yeah.
And it is art, and then there's entertainment. So that would be my message. And anyone watching this, if you want to sign a check, you want your name on a wall in this artist residency, just find me.
Thank you. I think one of the things that's come out of this is that it is very, very specific to who we are, but also where we live, where we come from, the history, the culture. So I wondered in that context, MJ, the same question essentially, what is the best way of, connecting art to reduce inequalities, to make it fairer? What are the practical things we can do? We heard from Lido, what she's doing to, I'm going to really shorten it just to make the question short, but to make a fair business in a fair country that respects people. So she's doing that in addition to her art. What's it like in Ghana? What can be done through you, through your friends, through your networks?
I think for Ghana, what we need to do is to have more corporate responsibilities. That's the corporate institution allowing to invest in initiatives or projects that are presented to them. They should come on board to support the artists that brings those projects out. Mm-hmm. Okay, and in the educational level, we should have people from the Western world coming into our country to invest in the talents that we have, because we have great and beautiful talent in Ghana. We need the education level. Example, I'm a DJ, I use Pioneer. I wish Pioneer people can come to Ghana to establish the Pioneer equipment, have a Pioneer school there, bring the equipment that we can purchase there. We can use it to enlighten and expose, get more exposure. You get it. And then also, I believe that the whole continent can introduce something like an artistic visa. Mm-hmm. It should be there. That will make it easy for artists to travel to other countries, because whenever we're able to travel to other countries, like how I met Lido, I told Lido this morning, Lido, I think we need to have a collaboration before we separate. And that's going to be good because I get to listen to her style of music, she gets to understand our style of music, and that's the cultural exchange. So we need to have those things. And anyone watching me, I'm going to ask you to do this for us. If you're out there and you can invest in supporting the women in arts in Ghana, please reach out to us, because we really, really need you guys to help us, to support us, to bring our women who are in ACT up there to the international level. Thank you.
Got it. But I'm going to ask one tiny question to break all the rules. Are you going to be mixing some of Lido's music into the clubs in Accra when you go back?
Yes.
Excellent.
I'm going to do that.
That's what I want. Fantastic. Thank you. Katja, in our work, we have talked about really nothing less than a different model, a different development model, a different economic model, different rules. I wondered if you could just expand on that a little bit. In order to get to social justice for people wherever they live, sometimes it's about changing the big structures that they operate in or are being asked to operate in, and maybe they're not the right ones, but just in simple words, what actually would need changing, transforming at the structural, institutional, global level to enable social justice?
Yeah, that's actually a huge question, but indeed I think that's the mandate of the UN and of course of many scholars and civil society people to figure out, what can we do to change direction, what can we do to address all these problems that we're facing. And in our latest publication, which we call the flagship report on crisis of inequality, we have actually laid out a proposal for how to change the global development model and to make it, a model that really works for social, economic, and climate justice, and for everyone, to have equal rights and equal opportunities. And we suggest, a couple of changes in economic policy. We are focusing very much on alternative economic approaches, saying that we have to move away from this kind of economic model, of pure market competition, which very much favors big companies, and really look, at the much smaller productive entities and associations and cooperatives that have already built into their DNA, social goals and environmental goals, and that also, employ the majority of people in not only in the developing countries, but even in Europe, the small and micro enterprises provide the bulk of work for people. We also, say that social policy, needs to be transformative, it needs to be universal, human rights based. We need really, very good public services for everyone, to actually have that education in the arts, for job capacities, health systems, social protection, all of this, and for everyone. That's very important. And finally, we also make, suggestions of how we can make global governance, more inclusive, with a bigger role for the Global South and also greater voice for civil society. And I think, these are these macro structures, where we think, a lot needs to change, but the impact could be immense also, because it's very hard, to work as an individual, against, the current of structural inequalities and historical injustices, which are still out there and which we haven't solved. But, just to maybe also end on a positive note, because I think, we have heard from these, amazing examples of you artists, who make a difference, with your individual lives and your individual example. And, so I think that's also a message, I would like to put forward, that, we need to connect much more, with the arts. We need to find more, communication between science and arts. For example, we have, had a migration project where we applied a lot of artistic methodologies. It's not only about the artists, but also about, normal people, taking part in artistic, workshops and expressions, which allows them, to express themselves and overcome, victimization and re-encounter their agency. So, it's not only being a professional artist, but also bringing everyone, towards artistic methodologies and being part of this. So, yes, maybe a final message, support your local artists, make connections, build bridges, And all of this is not possible if we don't find, the political alliances and the social movements, that support change. So this is also something we are very concerned with, and where we try to identify, what are the political constellations, that are possible to make change possible.
Thank you, Katja. Your big boss, Gilbert Humbo, has recently launched, and we've joined, have many governments and others, a global coalition for social justice, which hopefully will act as sort of a bolster, will add momentum to this global direction of travel that we need to go on. Specifically, because as Lido mentioned, employment is dignity, employment is respect, employment is self-sufficiency. What will the ILO be doing in the next 2 to 3 years to support the direction that we need to go on?
Well, thanks. I think Lido would be a great spokesperson for the ILO. That is precisely the idea that employment is dignity, and that's the best way to fight against poverty. It's not charity. It's not handouts. No, I think it's a very exciting opportunity for the ILO, but also for the whole United Nations system, because it's beyond rights. It's beyond addressing inequalities. It's going to some of these deeper structural and, as you mentioned, historical factors that are behind inequality that is really driving us today. So I think our Director General really has a bold vision about bringing the whole UN system to look at these issues, and especially the people that are behind these issues. So there's no point in saying we need more culture in the world without saying how are we going to support the businesses and the workers that are producing that culture. So, my message would be twofold. One would be for those of you out there who are about to enjoy a great Antigel concert, or any concert for that matter, take a moment to reflect on the hard work that's going into it. You've heard the enormous challenges that both artists, but also many of the small businesses that are behind culture are facing. Take a moment to reflect on those and how we can make sure that artists and everyone associated with them is getting a fair share out of the incredible economic output that culture produces. And maybe one other point, this is more directed at artists, and I think this is, I think we've heard about this importance of getting out of our very atomized and self-centered rut that we've been in the last 20 years, when everyone's just out to fend for themselves, look out for their own money and income. And can we recreate a narrative of global cooperation, of social justice, that doesn't just resonate to us, but resonates to, precisely as you said, some of the disaffected people out there that are gravitating toward ideological extremes. And that's a real challenge for, I think, the art community. Katja and I can write reports, but I'm afraid they're not getting the same playlist that our two artists here have. They're really focused on a small, targeted audience, getting that people excited to feel social justice, not just read about it and think about it, but to feel it. That's your challenge, and I know it's a big challenge, but I'm really looking for it. I know you guys can do it.
So thank you for joining us on this panel today. It's almost impossible to summarize. I've really enjoyed it. We've heard of the efforts to change hearts. We've heard about the motivation for that. We've heard about the journeys and where people have started on their journeys. We've heard about the obstacles that they've faced. We've heard about the work within the UN system on research and setting rules and standards to change minds as well, because it's often system change that's going to support local action for social justice. My one last message to you is, if you like what you're hearing in this panel, if you want to be inspired, please join UNRISD. Go online, sign up to our newsletter. It comes every couple of months. It's got some great research on it, but also activities like this, where we have panels that connect to different communities who are fighting their own battles in a world that's become so incredibly difficult and tragic at the moment, that we all need to work together to find that solidarity and cooperation that you were talking about right at the end. So let me just conclude by thanking our panel for their time, for their thoughts, for their honesty, and for their souls. Thank you very much again, and good luck to you as you continue in your work. Thank you.